Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. This episode is sponsored by Paris Costumes. Today's guest is three-time Oscar nominee, Arianne Phillips. Tom Ford's go-to costume designer for his first feature film, A Single Man, in my estimation, one of the most beautiful films ever made. One of the most influential women in the fashion world who's no stranger to working on mid-century films, from Brad Pitt's Hawaiian Shirt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to Reese Witherspoon's Perky Frocks in Walk the Line. Always pushing her creativity, she often takes breaks from film to design theater, music videos, and concert tours, as well as styling print work and cover shoots for fashion magazines like Vogue Italia. She's shared in recent interviews, "It's kind of a palate cleanser," she explains. "I've gone out of my way to work across genres so I can be choosy with the films that I do work on." The breadth and scope of her career is astonishing. This versatility has not gone unrecognized. She has garnered 8 nominations and a win from the Costume Designers Guild Awards, in addition to nominations for 3 Academy Awards, 2 BAFTAs, and a Tony. She was honored at the Venice Film Festival with the Campari Passion for Film Award, which celebrates important artists who contribute significantly to the success of a film. She also wrote and directed a short fashion film for Prada and styled a brand film for Gucci, nominated for a BAFTA Award for the film A Single Man, and was also nominated for an Oscar for that film. She started out styling Lenny Kravitz and collaborated with Madonna for 2 decades. After wrapping the box office hit Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, she didn't think she would take another film until Olivia Wilde reached out to her to discuss a movie she was directing and acting in called the recent Don't Worry, Darling. With the goal of giving back to the people and places around her, she advocates change and charity through talents, brands, and creative campaigns. Without further ado, please welcome back to the show Academy Award nominated costume designer Arianne Phillips to the Designing Hollywood Show. Arianne, welcome. Welcome to Designing Hollywood. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. That's such a nice introduction. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, you know, I have to say, whenever I look over the people that Marilyn and Martika send me to talk to, I always go back and look at your filmography, and you have one of the coolest filmographies. I mean, movies like Tank Girl and Hedwig and the Angry Inch. How did you begin your career, and how did you get into becoming a costume designer? Did you always want to work in film?
So as a young girl, when MTV came upon the scene, it really lit something deep in me, and I knew that I wanted to do that. I was always preoccupied and thrilled and obsessed with pop culture as a kid. And funny enough, I was raised in a very artistic, kind of bohemian family, and I was raised without a television. And the biggest form of entertainment was going to the art house theater in our small town in Northern California.
All right.
So I was exposed to a lot of foreign films, a lot of avant-garde films that I think my parents would consider nowadays inappropriate for kids. But in those days, my sister and I to everything. And that really sparked my imagination as a person. I was also really obsessed with pop culture, street fashion, rock and roll.
Right.
Rock. Dad is a jazz musician, and so I guess the biggest rebellion I could conjure up was to be into pop music, because he was a bit of a jazz snob. And so I like any preteen or teenager, I was obsessed with popular radio. And when I guess I was about 12, MTV came on the scene, and that blew my mind. It was kind of this convergence of film and music together, which up until that point, I think there were these rock and roll movies like The Rose or Song Remains the Same, The Yellow Submarine, but MTV was like just an epiphany for me as a young person, and I wanted to do that. So that was really my big motivation. So I knew going to college I wanted to study art and potentially film. Long story short, I found my way to New York City, and I started under the pretense of continuing my college education, I had been to San Francisco State, and I got to New York, and I started working with stylists, fashion stylists in fashion magazines. I love photography. That's a great thing about fashion, is working in the still tableau form. So I got a lot of my initial training working as a fashion assistant to these editors. And then, as luck would have it, and I'm talking big luck, through a mutual friend, I met Lenny Kravitz, who had one toe in New York City. And whenever he was gigging with other bands as a drummer, he was playing with New Edition and Tina Marie, and we became fast friends. And Lenny was like, well, when I make my first record, you can be my stylist, And I was like, oh. And at the time, I started assisting stylists that were doing music videos. So that's really the ground zero of how I started. And then, of course, music videos was kind of my gateway to film, because when I did start working on music videos and with Lenny, just as he would promise with his, how lucky was I to meet Lenny and for him to be such a talented musician who would gain success and notoriety. And luckily, he brought me on that path. So thanks, Lenny. We're still in touch. It's great.
Well, I guess you really did go his way.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry. I know, terrible.
Bing, boom, bomb. So when I was working with Lenny, and I had the great good fortune to work on his videos styling him, I learned pretty early on. I had the experience of it's pretty binary. You have the performance music videos where you're dressing the artist to look, hot and sexy and attractive, cool. And then you have the narrative videos where you're acting out the song. And we were doing one of those videos for a song called Mr. Cab Driver on his first record. And I remember the director, Lenny, or someone said, it was pretty scrappy in those days. We didn't have big budgets, but he's like, oh, we want to dress this guy as a cab driver. And I remember thinking, how do you dress a cab driver? What does that mean? And it was really like another seminal moment for me, or one of the early seminal moments for me of just like, wow, you can use clothes to help create the character and move the story. So that lit my imagination and inspired me to kind of pursue the narrative thread in pop culture, I guess you could say. And from there, friends of mine from college were making a film, and they asked me to do the costumes, and it was just like step by step, and that's kind of how it started.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I look at your career beginning in the mid '90s and then all the way to the 2000s. In that 5-year period of time, you work with Anton Fuqua on The Replacement Killers, where you got to got to dress Chow Yun-fat, Rachel Talalay's Tank Girl. You worked for Milos Forman on The People versus Larry Flint. I mean, the man who directed One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus. And then you began your association with James Mangold working on Girl Interrupted. I mean, this is an incredible array of directors and films that you worked on. And I mean, how did you make that jump from music video to film? And then how did you meet all of these talented directors?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, hearing you rattle off these directors, my great good fortune for sure. It was just like one relationship at a time. The first movie that, after I kind of helped my friends with their college movie, I got a break. I met Brandon Lee, and Brandon Lee invited me to do The Crow. The Crow, his character he was playing was based on a rock and roll singer, and I, being working in rock and roll, it seemed to make a lot of sense. So that was kind of my first legitimate film. And then during that time, it was kind of through these relationships that I made. One of the first people that I met when I moved to Los Angeles from New York City was Daryl Hannah. And we met doing photo shoots, and she was one of the first people to really extend herself to me when I moved here to LA. And she recommended me work with her and Chris Guest on Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
Right.
So,
what a great movie that is.
The second movie. And then my third was Tank Girl. Tank Girl, I got it on an interview, and I think that was really based on my work in music. That film was so music-based, and the director, Rachel Talalay, was just really interested, I think, in a lot of the work that I was doing at the time, which was kind of, wasn't traditional. I wasn't a traditional costume designer. So they took a risk on her and Aaron Warner, the producer. And that was a really incredible experience. And from there, I realized that I could either stay in that genre lane of comic book movies, or I could try and, I really wanted to work in character-driven films, the kind of films that I really enjoy going to the movie to see. And I got wind of Milos Forman was making People vs. Larry Flint. Now, Milos was probably one of the very first directors who I knew by name as a kid, because my parents took me, as I said earlier, to all these art house movies, and I saw Fireman's Ball and, Loves of a Blonde and Ragtime and all these great, great films, of course, Amadeus and Valmont and everything. But even before that, his early films with subtitles.
Right, sure.
So I got wind of it through typical channels, through my agent, and I made a presentation, and I just put everything into it. And lucky for me, they took a chance on me. I don't know why, but they took a chance on me. And that really was a big moment for me, because those are the kind of films I wanted to work on. And I knew that I also wanted to keep it diverse. Like, I wanted to keep my resume diverse. I felt like my superpower, since I didn't come up traditionally through the ranks as a costumer or assistant costume designer, I was educated along the way by apprenticeship, but not even traditional apprenticeship. I kind of learned mostly from like the crews that I hired, and just being, doing kind of cobbling it together, kind of making it to a thing. But I knew that what was really going to keep me going and keep me from becoming redundant or that kind of imposter syndrome that I definitely was victim to at the time, was to keep my resume a reflection of my aesthetics, like of my interests. And that would be the directors I work with, the projects I chose to work on. And I really took care to curate films that I felt I could bring something to, because I kept my career alive in music videos, working with artists, also in fashion editorial, both advertising and straight up editorial work, which afforded me the luxury to be choosy about the projects, the films I want to work on. And ultimately, film work is what really is, the most satisfying, the most fulfilling. I do love working in the print world, and I love working with musicians. Trust me, I've had some incredible learning experiences and worked with incredibly talented people. But I think the end goal for me was always to make sure that I was choosing projects that kept my creatively and learning new things. And also, if you who didn't know me, looked at my resume, it could be a reflection of who I am and my interests.
Sure. Well, it's interesting to me that you have worked on a lot of mid-century movies. I mean, that had that People versus Larry Flint, Walk the Line, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, your recent Don't Worry, Darling,
and Girl Interrupted.
And Girl Interrupted. I mean, and it was very much of the period. I mean, was that something, like you said, you curated your work, but were you drawn to that aesthetic because of maybe where you grew up, or is there something about, and obviously obviously people have gone to you because of that. Was that a favorite period of time for you?
It's funny, I think about that often, and I think it really started with Girl Interrupted, and that was my first film with Jim Mangold.
Right.
I would say, a kid that grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Sure.
That this is a period that holds a lot of memory for me and a lot of emotion, and that I feel I understand I learn new things all the time because there's different geographical stories, there's fiction, there's biography, I've kind of I've traversed the period. And I love mid-century design. Like mid-century design to me, in terms of American stories, is a high point, not only in design from, an architectural, art, and fashion perspective, but also from music as well. Like when I think of Walk the Line and all that great music. So I do have the personal connections to it. And I think people, I guess it was like Girl Interrupted and Walk the Line, both with Jim Mangold.
Right.
So that, and then these other opportunities came to me. And, in America, London is the capital of period film, right? So like if you live in London, that's where most period film was. And in America, we don't have a lot of period film. And I think with streaming and different content, we have more these days.
Yes.
But mostly our period is 20th century, and it's like, mid-century. So the opportunities there to do period film are for the most part mid-century films here in America. So those films, I think, are all extremely American. And if you think of Walk the Line, Don't Worry, Darling. So I guess, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So yeah, it's a combination of the directors and, of course, the script itself.
Well, you have this long-running relationship with James Mangold, and you got to work on a Western, 3:10 to Yuma. You worked on the thriller Identity, which is another film I quite enjoy. You worked on the Tom Cruise movie Night and Day, a movie that I don't think people talk about enough because that's a great film as well. How did you meet James Mangold, and how do you, as a costume designer, how do you develop that ongoing relationship with the director?
Sure. I met Jim and his then wife, Kathy Conrad, his producer, during that time when I had done The People vs. Larry Sony, and one of the executives, Michael Costigan, who's an incredible producer, gone on to do incredible movies. Michael was a young executive at the time, and he said to me one day on set on People vs. Larry Flynn, he's like, I have this great property, Girl Interrupted. I knew the book. And he said, you got to work on this. It's with Jim Mangold. And I had seen Heavy, his movie Heavy. And I don't think I'd seen Copland at that point, but I'd seen Heavy, and I loved that movie. I was like, oh, yes, this is amazing. And I think I think I harangued Michael for a while because it took a minute for it to get going. Because I think it was like 96, and Girl Interrupted, I think we shot in 98. Anyway, there's a couple-year lag there. So I was really thrilled, and it's just like a chemistry and a sensibility. I think when it comes to these relationships where, these ongoing relationships, work relationships, it's a who you end up working with, and if you see eye to eye, both sensibility-wise, aesthetically, creatively, how you communicate. And Jim is incredibly thoughtful, intelligent, and exciting filmmaker. And working with him, he was actually a student of Miloš's in Columbia, and he's a contemporary of mine. Jim and I are the same age, and he's just fantastic. We get along, we just, and I love the films that he makes, and, his films are very character centric. Like he's almost like a theater director if you think about how he directs films and the character development. And that's a dream for a costume designer. And Jim really, really appreciates costume design. So that's just luck, you know, and meeting someone so early in my career that I felt seen by and valued. You know, Jim is the kind of director who pretty much on every film I've ever worked with him on has called me from the editing room to say, oh my God, these costumes are great, or to say something, you know, nice. And that's really unusual. We haven't worked together in a while, but we're actually going to be working together in 2023. We're doing a Bob Dylan movie together that we've been talking about for a really long time.
That's perfect for you.
They're mid-century film, yes. Really, really, and great, you know, to be able to be reunited with Jim. It's been a little while. So I'm super excited about that.
Now, I have to ask you, I know nothing about fashion, but one of my heroes is Tom Ford. And I wear Tom Ford Black Orchid cologne. If I weighed less and was in great shape, I would only wear Tom Ford clothes. Now, a single man, when I first saw it, I'm like, a fashion designer, you know, making a movie. I was just floored by that film. It was so gorgeous to look at. But I actually, it was the first time I ever came out of a movie, and I'm like, I was thinking about you, not knowing you. I'm like, how does Tom Ford have a costume designer working for? That has to have been the most intimidating job ever. Was it? Now that I've got you in front of me, what was it? Were you scared, like working for Tom Ford?
Well, luckily I knew him beforehand.
Oh, okay.
We knew each other socially. I had never worked with him, but we knew each other socially. And he had been saying for a little while that, you know, I knew that Tom, before he was a fashion designer, he was an actor and he lived in Los Angeles. And Tom and his then husband, Richard, unfortunately, we lost Richard last year, but his longtime partner and husband, him and Richard, once we met in the late 90s, I guess, you know, every time they'd see a film that I worked on, they would send, you know, call me or send an email. They're really big film buffs. And then eventually I started hearing these little rumors that Tom wanted to direct, and I think I actually just asked him straight out at some, you know, something I saw him at. And he said, oh yeah, definitely. He wasn't real forthcoming, but he did acknowledge that was something he wanted to do. So when he did call me and we met for lunch, I was most excited to see or to read what he wanted to make as a director, because I'm always super curious, just like Olivia Wilde as well, and also like Madonna, like these directors who have other disciplines, right? Like Madonna, multi-hyphenate, Olivia Wilde as an actor, like just understanding what, you know, it's what, 3-5 years of their lives, sometimes more, developing these projects from script to screen. Through the promotion. So that, yeah, I always say like being a costume designer is being a people detective, and what keeps me in this job is people and just discovering things about them and this kind of the mindset. And so I'm equally as interested in my director. I want to be, in order, like for director, I have to respect them, admire them, be inspired by them. It's kind of a heavy checklist, and Tom ticked all those boxes, of course. And I read the script and I was floored, and it gave me so much insight to Tom as a man, and I was so much respect and admiration. I was so excited. I wasn't nervous. I was just more curious about what the process would be like, and I was really excited about the conversations, because one of the greatest things, one of the most challenging things about working with a director is most directors are white cis males, and most directors don't really have the vernacular for nuance when it comes to cloth and costume. And it's hard to express aesthetics sometimes if you don't have the vernacular. And what with Tom, just like with Madonna and with Olivia Wilde, is these are people that understand intrinsically the nuance of clothes. You know, Olivia and Madonna wearing them as performers, they understand how a character can come together with clothes, and Tom as well. Tom is a creative director of a, you know, well, before his own company, he was at Gucci and the YSL, And he's been imparting aesthetic direction to teams of people for years, since the beginning of his career as a creative director. So he was like the most organized, most prepared director I've almost ever worked with. And he had beautiful mood boards. And, this was second nature to him. And he also has a really good sense of narrative. He's very intelligent. A lot of fashion designers create narratives with their collection.
Sure.
And when they're talking about their customers, they're always talking about their customer as a person. Like, who is she? What does she want? So these are the, getting in the mindset on that level, and then working in creative fields. So I wasn't intimidated. I was deeply flattered and deeply excited and curious. And I think curiosity is really the thing that gets me out the door and in the room.
I mean, you've even worked on, and this is funny again, you worked on the two Kingsman movies for Matthew Vaughn, which are literally, it's based on comics sort of, but about super secret agents that wear their clothes. I mean, they go to Savile Row. They even have a clothier there in the film. That must have been something
their base of operation is a Savile Row table.
I mean, you must have loved that.
I did. That was why I did the movies, I should say. But,
yeah.
And I knew Matthew Vaughn a little bit because he was Guy Ritchie's producing partner, and Guy Ritchie directed a movie, Swept Away, that I worked on. Madonna were married, and so Matthew was around, and then Matthew went on to become a director himself with Layer Cake and Ass, and I was a fan of his movies. And it also meant, for the first one anyway, it was a reunion, and the second one with Colin Firth,
right,
from Single. So that was a big allure. And then actually the thing that really was what was the final yes for me was that Matthew made a deal with Mr. Porter, the online luxury retailer, men's luxury e-commerce fashion retailer. And he had said that one of the things, he grew up having his suits made at Huntsman on Savile Row himself. And he said he always wanted to be able to get like the costumes from the movie. So he made a deal to create a Kingsman Savile Row based collection.
Wow.
That would be a supporter, and he wanted me to also design that in tandem with the costumes, and he offered me in on that merchandise experience, which is unprecedented because I don't know if you know, but costume designers are work for hire.
Yes, of course.
And thus, when my colleagues designed those superhero suits and the Halloween costumes, and the clothing lines, and all that stuff, the bobbleheads, we unfortunately receive any compensation or credit for it. So this was an opportunity, it was like a litmus test for me to see if this could happen, because Matthew owned the property. So he alone could cut me in on that deal, essentially. So
that's amazing.
It was a great experience, and it was really, really fascinating to be able to, one thing that was clear, and Matthew made clear, is that we were going to design the right costumes for the movie, and that the menswear collection would come afterwards. But I found myself, when I was designing the movie, thinking, well, if I'm going to use, this stripe or whatever fabric, I want to make sure I can get it for the collection as well, so that when someone wants to buy that suit, they're getting the real thing, because my name was going to be.
Sure.
So it actually really was a wonderful experience, because then I decided to make it 100% British, like the best of British, like the costumes. So all the fabrics were milled in England, and to be able to have that continuity to this product that people could have. I had had this really crazy experience on 310 to Yuma, the Western I did with Jim Mangold. where I had some of it on The Crow too, but that was a little more, it had some negativity around it because of the tragedy. But I had like these crazy stalkers after 3:10 to Yuma, people that were trying to get Ben Foster's coat in the movie. And I think, after 20 plus years with Madonna, I don't think any single costume has received so much interest than the coat that Ben Foster wears in 3:10 to Yuma, and mostly for men. Like when men get a bee in their bonnet, oh my God, it's so different than like young girls. Like it's great. So I knew that having that, so I saw that potential in terms of being able to design something that would also be in turn potentially available to the public, and also have that experience for my colleagues and other costume designers, and how we could figure out how to be part of the equation. It was great.
That's a fantastic story. I have never heard that before. The fact that he cut you in on that's fantastic. Well, now let me ask you this. You obviously brought it up. I was going to ask you about this. You have a 2-decade relationship with Madonna. We were talking before the show. I was telling you how much I love like the Frozen video and that black dress, and you designed her videos. You designed her costumes. When she was directing a feature film, you worked for her there. What was the relationship you have with, obviously Madonna, the image of a rock and roll star, a pop star is incredibly important. And what is it like styling for her? And is it similar to working on a film, or is it different? And if so, how is it different?
No, it is very similar in that for her, it always starts with the content. So if we're doing an album cover or music video, of course, it always starts with music. And usually the kind of concept, like when she's written the album, there are themes, themes that she's been writing the songs about, things she's been influenced by, whether it's a book she's read or paintings or all of the above. And so when I first started working with her, it was in 97 with the Ray of Light album. And I worked with her all the way through the album cover for her last album. And there's always, for her, she's incredibly, and also incredibly well-prepared and research person. And she has a very high, in terms of, she's super knowledgeable about art and culture. So there's always a lot there. And, she is really great with playing characters. As you know, she's the queen of reinvention. And, she was well into her success and persona as a global icon, superstar by the time I met her in 97. And then it just kept continuing. And we just got to play with so many in so many different ways. Like, I did a lot of print work with her. We did a lot of editorials for magazine, album covers, and then to design 6 of her world tours, which is a mixture of being a costume designer and a fashion editor, which is like being a curator. Because we brought certain fashion designers on as part of her tradition, her tours, like whether it was Jean-Paul Gaultier or Dolce & Gabbana, she had worked with them, previous tours. So being able to curate fashion for her as well as design costumes, and those tours, you can have 30 people on stage, from dancers to specialty musicians, background singers. And, I think on the last tour we counted 750 pairs of shoes we were traveling with. It's a huge production. And the rehearsals that go into the tours are 12 to 16 weeks. They're like a big movie. And the wonderful thing about working with Madonna is getting to work with the best photographers and the best directors, and teams of some of the most talented, exciting artists ever. So it really was never boring, always challenging in the best way. And constantly learning new things. I think that's a thing that rubbed off on me from being around her, is she constantly challenges herself. And I think, yeah, I like to think I was that way before I met her, but I think I really learned the value of kind of being out of your comfort zone and learning new things and pushing yourself creatively. And I really learned that from her. And, you know, she brought me along in so many ways. And I think one of the most wonderful experiences I had with her was her behind the camera, directing WE. That was extraordinary and really, really special standalone experience.
Yeah, I mean, again, this long collaboration. It's so. I mean, obviously, when I was growing up in high school, when her first album dropped, and then of course, like a Virgin, she was a fashion icon, and everything from when she did Vogue and all. It's just amazing how I mean, 40 years she's to this day when she appears on late night television, I'm always watching what she looks. What is she wearing now? And she's still, you know, an icon as much as she ever was. So it's amazing. Now I have to ask you, as I get to Quentin Tarantino, obviously Reservoir Dogs begins with the monologue about Madonna. Actually, let me tell you what Like a Virgin's about. And I won't repeat that monologue, even though I probably could. I want to ask you, did you ever talk to Madonna about the opening of Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs?
No, but I do have a funny story. So when I first moved to LA from New York, a friend of mine had been sent a script. And I moved to LA on the premise in the 90s that I wanted to be a costume designer. That's why I left New York. And a girlfriend of mine who was very successful at the time, working, she was a hair and makeup person. She did hair, sometimes she did makeup. She got sent the script, and she said, you know, I got sent this script, and, you know, if you want to read it, I'll recommend you for it. So she sent me Reservoir Dogs. And I don't think I think maybe I'd read one script before, or two scripts. And I remember reading that scene and rolling my eyes. I totally didn't understand it on page. I was like, what is this? And, you know, I certainly didn't have the savvy or the understanding scripts. I mean, that script was a very well written, and it was getting the irony or the humor, taking it for face value, and, you know, of course, I didn't have the opportunity to meet on it. And the most incredible Betsy Hyman designed that movie and did, you know, so it's iconic. That movie is as iconic as Madonna. That movie is iconic. But no, I've never had that conversation with her, and I almost asked Quentin, or told Quentin that story when I was together, and I like, nah, I was a little, Quentin's intimidating. Took me a while to like get comfortable enough to like, you know, kind of just shoot the shit. But I didn't. Actually, maybe you can edit that part out.
No, I mean, look, the work you did on, I think everything that you did in your career led you to doing both Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Don't Worry, Darling, because those are, talk about mid-century. Okay. Whether you go from Slim Aaron's photographs and Don't Worry, Darling. I mean, you shot at the house that Slim Aaron shot in, I think, and those photographs, and then of course Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, my God, the costumes in that film are like you just said, they're as iconic as any film that's come out that I can remember in the last 50 years. That must have been, was that experience the most, what was that like for you? That must have been like the dream project of dream projects. Because you're designing with movies within movies and then out on the, incredible. What was that like? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, working with Quentin was incredible. It was, I mean, the script, when I read the script, I mean, I have to say, I think it's the first script I've ever read in my whole career that I absorbed in one reading. It read like a novel. You know, a lot of scripts I struggle with. I have to read them a few times because of all the technical, you know, camera work and, you know, some of the scripted stuff that's not as descriptive. And Quentin's script, I think the one that I read at first was like 40 pages or something. Fantastic. Yeah, it was, you know, always been way up high on my dream list. You know, it ended up being like a crazy opportunity for me that I didn't see coming. I was working on another movie actually with Jim Mangold. We were prepping the Patty Hearst movie, and that got shut down kind of around the time Patty Hearst spoke out against a movie being made about her, and that movie kind of went away after about a month, and that opened up the opportunity right when Quentin was gearing up to start touring up for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I got wind of it. I kind of went back to like my early 90s self, a really big for him, probably the most involved ever, because I figured, would he hire me? Doesn't he has such an incredible legacy of costume designers. Some of the best costume designers ever have worked with him, and it's just you know, it was great. And working with Quentin was an amazing experience. It was, I think, the most bonded I've ever felt with crew, a great crew. A lot of his crew is returning. It's done a lot of movies with him. And, you know, once I kind of got the rhythm of being the new kid on the block, once I got a little bit of the rhythm, you know, I was just in heaven every day. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches and actors and directors.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was a definitely a once in a lifetime career opportunity, and it was a lot of fun, and it was really, really great, and also very nostalgic experience in terms of like thinking. You know, I like Quentin, grew up outside of LA, outside of Hollywood, and would come to Hollywood on special occasions. And a lot of his perspective of how he wanted the film designed was kind of through, as he said to the production designer once in a meeting to Barbara Ling, kind of the perspective of like his 8-year-old self looking out the back window driving down Hollywood Boulevard. And I really like took that to heart. My grandparents lived in LA, and I grew up in Northern California and would fly down for, you know, Christmas and summer break and stuff. So being able to get inside of Quentin's head, and we're also peers, we're the same age. So I really, again, I loved working with him, and he really, really loves costumes and understands costumes and really appreciates it. And one of the things that's so great about him is not only how prolific the costumes have to be in his films and how detail oriented. He, you know, I'd heard all these crazy stories about how exacting he is. The thing about him that I would say is similar theme through a lot of these directors that I've worked with who I think are so special, like Tom Ford and Madonna, Jim Mangold, is like, Quentin's the same. It's like, they're like, here's my idea, but if you have a better idea, let's see, you know, what works best. And that's like the best invitation, to work with a director with vision, but invite you to bring and add to that vision and to be open to that discussion is really where the collaboration is.
Absolutely. I mean, I hear that a lot, and it's that's what film is. You know, I think that's what great directors do, is they surround themselves with people they know that they can collaborate with, who will bring something to the party. I mean, that's the whole point of it all. Now, we've only got a few more minutes left, but I did want to touch on, of course, your latest work, which is Don't Worry, Darling, which, again, between the Matthew Libatique's photography and what Olivia Wilde wanted to do with mid-century work, and your costumes, they're sumptuous. I mean, they're just absolutely astonishing. The film has an incredible look to it. How was that process for you? And I was really knocked out by Booksmart, which was Olivia Wilde's directorial debut. And I was lucky. Somebody showed me she had made not a mood board, but a video, like a rip-o-matic, what you would call it in advertising. Yeah, and I saw that, and she had such a clear vision before she started on this film. What was the process like working with her on Don't Worry, Darling?
God, for me, it was like falling in love. I mean, Olivia is like a unicorn. She is a superhero. She's, you know, she's 37 years old. She has, she's so accomplished as an actress. She's in TV, she's done films, she's a mother of two. She is an extraordinary woman. She's directed music videos for like Rainsford and Red Hot Chili Peppers, short films, and this is her second feature. I mean, she is very special, very, very special. And she has this incredible ability to be super prepared and to have, she's very visually talented in terms of like these mood boards and being able to visualize what she wants in aesthetics. And yet she is so, she's how can I explain it? She's so generous, and she's so, she's not, what's the word? You're going to have to edit this a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I will. Don't worry.
Olivia she just so welcomes her collaborators, and working with her was other level. At this point, we're almost different generation. She's a young director, and it's funny to be at this point in my career where sometimes I'm one of the more experienced people on set. I was always the kid on set. And yet I learned so much watching her work, her generosity and her openness in terms of these conversations we had about the characters, and her ability to bring us together, the heads of department, Katie Byron, the production designer, Maddie Labatique, who in their own rights, Katie is young in her career, and she is just a force. She's so talented. And Maddie, for me, is he is someone I've wanted to work with for a really long time. So I'm a huge fan of this work. And
he's amazing.
This is beautiful work ever.
Is it true that you hid plot clues in the clothes themselves? Like if people were observing, they might glean something from the actual clothes about what was actually happening in the plot of the film?
Well, what I would say is that you really have to see the film twice. What I did is, the beauty of Don't Worry, Darling, for me, especially being a mid-century film, is that it's a fictional story, right? Like, a lot of the films I've worked on, like even A Single Man is based on a novel. Girl Interrupted is based on a true story, also a novel, and Walk the Line's biopic. So for me, working on this movie that, Olivia made clear, we get to create what victory is. We get to create this world together. And without, giving any spoilers away, what is eventually revealed in the film, I kind of got to leave some crumbs with the choices I made. So, For instance, my colleagues who watch period film, it's a study in what was, right? The exacting of recreating authenticity. So in this film, on many different levels, I had a lot of freedom to not only interpret the period, but also to kind of foreshadow what was to be revealed. So it's the kind of movie that you need to see twice.
Right.
I'm sure you know. So I did take liberties with the costumes that might, a real period aficionado might be jarred by. And I took that liberty for a couple different reasons. One, because the story called for it in certain ways, and also because we were making up our own, this is our own fantasy of what victory is. And I really was looking to have that kind of freedom in the period. So, it's little things and it's bigger things. I use a lot of colors that are heightened, that aren't particularly period correct, and then some other things. And some of that was for me and the actors and Olivia. And, I always say a costume is like a beam me up suit for an actor. costume's job is to create a character and inform the audience. God forbid the sound goes out, who you're looking at, what's happening, where you are, what the period is. But it's also a physical experience for the actor. When I'm on Tank Girl, when Malcolm McDowell came to our first fitting, I think that's probably the most nervous I've been. It was before email. I never talked to him on the phone. He walks in the fitting room, and because of his schedule, I had to have everything made and ready for him because he was working 2 days later. And his costumes were all designed and made. We couldn't shop them because it's futuristic. And he walked in, and Malcolm McDowell was so intimidated, and he looked around the room, and he was inspecting everything, and you could hear a pin drop, and my heart was pounding. I mean, I could barely hear. I was so nervous. I was sweating. And I remember he just turned to me and he said, "Thank you." And I was like, "Thank you?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I had no idea who my character was. I've been so busy. I was on another project, and, I understand." And I realized early on, I had that experience, and I realized that I could help assist an actor and how important that is to help in that collaboration. And it was kind of went from like a quote that Olivier, I read somewhere along the way in some acting book, maybe in like a Uta Hagen book or something when I was a teenager, because I read a lot of acting books. I thought I would be an actress when I was 16, about how Laurence Olivier always started with his character from the shoes up, because that's how he informed how the character would walk. And Malcolm McDowell, of course, is also a British actor. As we know, American actors have a tendency to be more Stanislavski-based in feeling and memory. And British actors oftentimes, I don't think it's so binary anymore, but British actors traditionally come from the theater, and it's a more of a physical experience. I would say the same for Vanessa Redgrave, who I worked with on Girl Interrupted and Colin Firth, and I love working with English actors because they're physical relationships, which I think as most British actors have some background in theater, at least of a generation. So, and even the younger actors.
Well, listen, I'm keeping you past your time. I know that you have to go.
That's okay. But you have to go.
Well, yeah, me too. But I wanted to ask you, are you on social media? Can people follow you on Instagram, find your work?
Yeah, Arianne Phillips, at Arianne Phillips on Instagram.
And do you, one last question. There's a lot of people that watch these shows that they want to know if they want to get into the profession. What are some of the things? What is some advice you could give to somebody who's thinking about a career in costume design, either for, say, rock and roll or movies?
Well, I think curiosity and flexibility are two of my favorite adjectives, because curiosity will get you in the door and get you into situations that you never dreamed possible, and also keep you learning, which I think is important. Flexibility is because you're collaborating with people and you have to be flexible with your ideas. It's not like being a writer who works alone or a painter. So I think those are probably my two biggest mantras. And, I would say beyond that, I do offer advice on an app called Intro, and all the, we charge for it. It's like one-on-one video calls.
Oh, wow.
But all the proceeds I donate to charity, and I figured that I could give advice and give back at the same time. So if anybody wants some more advice beyond that, they're welcome to see me on Intro, the app.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, Arianne Phillips, what a delight to speak with you today. I thank you for coming back on to the Designing Hollywood show, and I can't wait to see what you and James Mangold conjure up for that Bob Dylan film. Very, very excited for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, Robert, did you want me to mention what I'm working on now?
Yeah, absolutely. What are you working on now?
Official, like so you can edit it?
Yeah, for sure.
We don't have to, but I just wanted to know.
No, I'll throw it in. That'd be perfect. Tell me what you're working on now. Well, let me ask you this. Arianne Phillips, what is your next project?
Well, I'm currently in prep on a very top secret but exciting project. It is it's called Folie et Deux, and it is the Joker 2, I guess you'd say. So with Todd Phillips, who no relation to me, but I'm really excited. I'm stepping kind of into Mark Bridges' footsteps, who did the first Joker, did the most iconic, incredible costumes. And this is the next iteration and another layer to what they created, and the story continues. It's really exciting.
Now, I didn't realize you're working on that. That is incredibly exciting. Now, there has been talk when this movie was announced that it is also a musical. And I can't imagine somebody with the background that you have in costume design and working for Madonna. Is this like another dream project for you?
Well, I cannot confirm nor deny, but I will say that it is a dream to work with Todd Phillips on this project, and Joaquin, to be reunited with Joaquin, and of course with Lady Gaga, who I've never worked with before.
Wow. Can I just say, very, very exciting. I thank you for giving us even a little bit of insight into that. Can't wait to see that, because boy, did I love that first film. But and I appreciate your keeping things close to the vest, you know. But our audience will definitely like to hear that. When do you start shooting?
We start shooting at the end of this year.
Okay, so you got time. You got some good. I would imagine all the experience that you had working on with Madonna. I mean, working with Lady Gaga and Madonna now. That's, I don't know what what do you do after that? Hang up your spurs?
Right? I know, exactly. I don't know what's next. It's an embarrassment of riches. Sure.
Wow, this is fantastic. Well, listen, it's been so much fun to speak with you, and Folie et Deux, man. I can't wait to see this.
Thank you.
One last thing. I would imagine you've read the script, right?
Yes.
Okay, you've read the script. Now, well, how would I put this question? On my level of excitement, should I set it to 11, like Spinal Tap would say? But this one goes to 11. Does this movie go to 11?
Set it to 25 plus.
Ooh, okay, a 25 plus. I will quote you on that.
It's very.
Well, thank you so much for being here. This is wow. You've just left me with. Now I'm really excited.
Thanks, Robert.
All right, thanks
for having me, and thanks to Marilyn. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. What a great time we've had. Thanks so much. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Paris Costumes. Paris Costumes has been a part of the history of the European theater, film, and television industry since 1856 and has become 21st century tailors. A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from The John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeekSingularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.